Let's give a huge welcome to Mary Lou Sanelli, tonight's speaker. She has earned a solid reputation in the literary and public speaking community through a steady commitment to writing and through 20 years of successful public readings and presentations. And she just happens to be a frequent columnist at the Kitsap Sun newspaper, which is how we found out about her. She's published 7 collections of poetry, 3 works of nonfiction, Among Friends, Falling Awake, and A Woman Writing. The Starstruck Dance Studio of Yucca Springs is her first novel, and her newest collection of essays, Every Little Thing, was nominated for a Pacific Northwest Book Award and a Pushcart Prize. Her first children's title, Bella Likes to Try, is forthcoming. So join me in welcoming Mary Lou.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Okay, I have to be honest with you, I'd never heard of your group until I was contacted by email. And I thought, well, with a group with a name like Enlighten, I think we're going to be a really nice audience. So thank you for being here tonight. I think that your group probably does a lot for your community. And I have to say, being a columnist for so many years, that's always been my way into my community. I've been a columnist I've lived in 3 places in the last 20 years. Port Townsend, I was a columnist there. And I was a columnist in the Peninsula Daily News covering the whole peninsula. Then I was a columnist in Seattle for the Seattle Times, and I still write for their opinion page. And then I moved to Bainbridge Island and got a column in the Kitsap Sun pretty quickly. So it's always been my way to like really connect with my community, write about what's happening around me. And that is why I'm here, because Barb, now which Barb? I found out there's 2 Barbs. So that Barb actually read one of my columns and invited me here tonight. So let me go back a little bit. As you know, I'm a writer and I'm a speaker, and I love being in front of my audience. In fact, I've made a recommitment to being live. You know, during COVID, it was so much Zoom this and Zoom that, and both in my dance work and in speaking work, and it just didn't really cut it for me. I would rather be right in front of you and sharing my work with you live. So let's go back a little bit. Yes, I published many books. Tonight I'm going to be speaking from my last book. But as a kid, I remember hiding behind a sectional couch my parents so proudly bought, covered in plastic, and then I would sit behind that and read their leather-bound encyclopedias they also were so proud to buy. And then years later, I remember hearing our priest tell my parents not to let me read too much. See, I got caught reading in church, and it wasn't the Bible. Not to let me read too much because he said books would fill my head with ideas. And you know what? They did. And that's the thing. That's the thing I learned very young. The books open the mind. And when I sat behind the couch to read, I was lost. And even at a young age, I knew books would be my life. Reading them as a kid, I always preferred, I was one of those bookworm kids rather than playing with a bunch of kids. Books would be my life. Reading them, and later it occurred to me writing them. It's just impossible. This is what I loved learning this early on. To not have an open mind to the world if you read books where we are allowed to enter the mind of another and discover so many different ways to see the world, but more importantly, so many ways to see ourselves within that world. I think as a child, that's what I loved, being able to imagine myself in so many different situations. And this was exactly what I believe my parents were most afraid of, and certainly my priest, possibly, although maybe not. Because in the silence, it occurred to them, they knew, and it occurred to them as I got older, what they were afraid of. Because in the silence of all my reading, so much was being said to me. So now we'll fast forward a little bit with my new collection. It is a collection of essays, and it was also nominated for the Washington State Book Award, which I think I'm the most proud of, because that nomination comes from our state librarians. But I didn't win. But I was not, it's all in the nomination, right? I tell you to say that, but and the word essays, it's really funny because my sister, when I told her that my collection of essays was going to be published, she was like, Mary Lou, actually my family calls me Maria Luisa, are you sure you want to call them essays? Don't you want to call them something else? And I knew what she meant. I really did, because the word essays does bring to mind something that's going to sound like dull, little academically competitive, or too serious. And I have to say, oh, excuse me, gentlemen in the audience, but that used to be true. But that was true when men decided what stories were told, where they were told, how they were told, and who got to tell them. But today's essay is everything I love about writing, and it's everything I love about reading. It's more of a memoir voice, and it's the voice of what I used to have to convince, especially when I first started writing for the Seattle Times, that the most personal is the most universal. Don't take myself out of the story, put myself right in the story, and say how I feel about it. This was a whole new concept for so many men running columns in the paper. They were really just more of journalism, state journalism. So now that there's so many more women reading, writing, editors, publishers, the modern day essay is just everything I love. So are we having a problem out there? Is that happening? Not happening? Is there a problem with the Zoom? Am I in the wrong place? Okay. Okay. So remember when the word corona was just the panic of our lives, hearing it, saying it, feeling it each and every moment of every single day? Remember? Well, I had to shelter in place like everyone else, and I was living in Belltown. So sheltering in place in a city is not like sheltering in place when you have a yard, a house and a yard to go out to. I mean, it got so bad in our condo that you had to sign up for the day that you would use the trash chute. So I had to shelter in place. So that became really good reason for me to collect this collection of essays and make it into a book. Now, my essays always begin as my columns. I'm a columnist, and I was writing for KUW and NPR, so I'm off on radio columns. Now, a radio column, you're only allowed 300 to 400 words. And even in the Kitsap Sun, well, they gave me a lot of words. To be the first columnist, I get about 900 in there. But generally, it's about 600 to 700 words. But that's not the real difference between turning a column into an essay. The real difference is in an essay, you can say whatever you really want to say, because I was so naive in the beginning. I thought I was writing my columns for the readers. And I am. Has anybody ever read one of my columns? I'm here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I love that. And I am writing for you. And the Kitsap Sun has never given me a problem, but other media outlets do. NPR gave me the most ever. Because you're really writing for who gives them the money. That's the problem with all of our media outlets. Everyone wants you to sing to the choir that they are getting paid, sponsored by. And it was such a wake-up call for me. Like, there were things I couldn't say, and I couldn't sway it that way too much, and I had to go way to the left, even if I was coming out somewhere in the middle, and all kinds of things like that. And but putting those columns into 2 book covers, you can be seriously honest as you want to be. So in quiet seclusion, so in keeping with what I need and who I am, what every writer needs. I put off all thoughts of tomorrow and how horrible it was to be caged within my condo within the city, and I dug in. But luckily, writing has always made me feel less sheltered from the world. So back to what kind of writing I do, and so many women do, men now more and more. David Sedaris is probably the most famous one we know of, but their insights, their memories, their reactions, overreactions, joys, difficulties that occurred along the way. And they're nothing. I'm the first one to say they are nothing compared to the worldly events that confront us on a daily basis, but they're my nothings. So naturally, like any writer, I wrote about them. And actually, because I prefer less tension in the world, who doesn't? I unwound in them. And that's what I've always wanted my readers to get from my writings, is kind of a way to unwind in the topic. There's no better compliment when I go into a friend's room and I see one of my books on their bedside table. I'm so happy because I know that maybe they fell asleep reading them, but yes, but they also unwound to it, because I really feel like no one should be going to bed after watching cable news. So it's called Every Little Things, Small Breakthroughs, Big Mistakes, because I am super good at those sometimes, and Endless Lessons. And I think I picked the title Every Little Thing. Actually came to me. Titles are a hard part of the thing. But my mother said to me when I started taking care of my aging mom, and I've never had children. I don't even have a house plant. I'm so busy with my work as both a writer and a choreographer. I don't, and a husband. I don't really want more than that. And my mother, then suddenly I had to take care of my mom, and I did worry a lot about all of the stuff I had to remember. And she was like, Maria Luisa, you worry about every little thing. And I was like, every little thing. That's my title. So, but I also like it because people are always asking, what's your book about? What's your book about? And there's not a writer alive that doesn't have a circle above our head that this is what it says. Oh my God, I hope you'll read it and find out. You have to have an answer, especially like on the radio, if you're interviewed or whatever, you have to have kind of an answer. And so I say, well, it's about every little thing. But what I mean by that is really it's about every little big thing in our everyday life. And people get that, suddenly they get that. So it's not a pat answer, but it's short enough because nobody wants to hear you going on and on about your book and what it's about, even if they ask you that question. So every little thing, I'm going to share just a couple things that I chose for you tonight. The first one, and I chose it because of its title, it's called Enlightened. So before we read this piece, and how long has it been since some of you have been read to? I'm a speaker, but I'm a literary speaker, so I share some of my work with my audience. But how long has it been since some of you have been read to? And that's a tricky thing in this day and age, because we're so used to having this going on. I mean, I read at conferences sometimes where there's stuff going on both sides. I'm like, it's too much. Mm-hmm. It's too much for our brain to take in at once. So this is wonderful, an intimate audience. I'm going to mention why I love that in this piece. But I had written a book. It's out there on the table. I think it's been my most commercial success. It's called Among Friends. It's on its third or fourth printing. It's an honest book about friendship. What worked for you? What didn't work? Why'd that break up? Which was a really important subject to me as a young woman because, well, long story short, my mother's best friend, for all the years I was growing up, is now married to my dad. So friendship became kind of an interesting subject for me. Like, oh my God, this is something you should never do to a friend, right? So that was the gift of it when I first started writing it was going to be a gift to my mom, like facing like what she had gone through and how hard that was. My parents are immigrants. My parents were arranged marriage. I mean, they were supposed to stay together. My dad was not supposed to cheat with her best friend, but he's Italian, so whatever. But so I wrote this book so that it was the third, and I read from that book in so many book clubs across the country, and there was almost never once when somebody didn't come up to me and tell me like something like went on in their family, kind of like that. I heard stories like, oh yeah, I found out later that my maid of honor had slept with my husband at the rehearsal dinner and stuff like that. It's like, oh my God, what kind of world? all these little stories. Sometimes people don't say it in the group. They wait to the book signing table, and then they go, what? So I mentioned that book in this essay. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that because it's why I was on this speaking tour. And this is something I wrote after having two completely different venues in 1 week. So, enlightened. Honestly, I don't know what to make of some of the things I hear my audiences say. Heaven knows it's enlightening to call oneself a speaker. Most days I keep my head down and I write without giving any thought to who's going to read my work. This is my freedom. This is my solitude. On the opposite side of solitude, though, there are times when I'm invited to surface in front of my readers, or more often than not, people have never heard of me or my work. Either way, for the couple of hours we are together, we are close allies, if everything goes well. And usually it does. This week, I was invited to two entirely different settings to give the same talk about friendship, or basically how it does us good to talk about friendship. So on Tuesday, I addressed women who work in Silicon Valley, where the hotel conference room looked over San Francisco Bay. And it had the most up-to-date sound equipment. It was better than the Microsoft Auditorium, which until this point I thought had been the most incredible auditorium I'd ever read in. The acoustics in this place was so good that no matter what I said, I felt I knew exactly what I was talking about. I was in control. A good mic can do that for you. Did you know that? I couldn't have planned how good the acoustics would be or how much more confident they would make me, because I rarely get the opportunity to speak on such a sophisticated stage. Technologically, I quickly learned that in the speaking world, now that I wrote this many years ago, but in the speaking world, there are all the other venues. And then there's this. But excuse me if I laugh a little here, because I do not begin to think that this kind of opportunity will come along that often. It's so competitive out there. It's why I need, like water and air, all the less formal venues, like this one. They are my constant practice. Now, take the old Grange Hall a few days later in North Spokane, where on Saturday, 70 women gathered to hear me speak about the same thing, friendship. And I had to work really hard to focus because even with 2 wood stoves burning, it was so cold inside, I couldn't stop shivering. And to see over the lectern a wobbly music stand, I had to climb up on an overturned cardboard box full of jiggling wine bottles. While the microphone, I am not kidding, hung in front of me like a Booth cartoon. So I told the people I was totally satisfied. It was wonderful. It would work just fine. And then I had to walk into the restroom, sit for 5 minutes with the door closed in a locked stall to have a little talk with myself about how good I am at what I do. But what struck me as soon as I stepped up to the mic was how much more relaxed this group of people were with each other and with me. My love of good acoustics is nothing compared to my love of relaxed intimacy. Now, back in Silicon Valley, when someone asked about process, and someone usually does, I said, well, listen, there's a lot to be said for just keeping at it day after day. And after watching the reaction for a few seconds, I added something about how people are turning to their phones for everything these days, but the instant gratification is the opposite of the slow process that good writing is, the kind that takes years to complete. It takes guts to say such a thing in Silicon Valley. I can say that I saw a few heads nodding. I can also say that I saw a few heads not nodding. One woman in her 20s, I think, stood to say how the corporate world isn't cutting it for her and that her ideas are not valued by the unreceptive men on her team. How even the word team is one she does not trust anymore. She feels less creative in the tech world, she said, less like herself. I have no friends because I have no time to have friends. So that's where my talk came into, why a conference like that would hire me. But I don't know what else to do, she said. When I said, I have heard that the madmen of our era wear hoodies. And God, thank God they laughed. Another admitted she went a little nuts. She went a little crazy before she quit coding. I went on a rampage, she said. Some of the stuff I did, I would never have done had I not been at the end of my rope. A silence fell over the room, as if no one wanted to say what it was she'd done. But everyone knew, except me. Now in Spokane, feelings about relationships were just as passionate. One woman shared how she'd overheard a younger co-worker refer to her as a geezer, and how she was devastated for days. I felt for her. I really did. When young women poke fun at age as if it diminishes a woman's worth, like driving a car off the lot, it spurs the fiercest feelings in me, too. Before I returned to my car, I took a stroll through the gardens around the Grange Hall, pleased with how well everything had gone, or I thought they did, until I heard someone say, well, I'll never get that hour of my life back. Are you kidding me? It was the geezer. Even if I know that there is always the one you can never win over, and in every audience there's one person you can never win over, I'm talking mean. Anyone who says such a thing within earshot of the person they wish to insult redefines mean. Fortunately, the woman walking beside her understood the point of the evening, that we need to, as women, support each other in the workplace, not cut each other down. You're just jealous, she said to the geezer. My next move may have happened mostly because she said that. I marched right up to the geezer and said in a surprisingly calm voice, I really enjoyed meeting you. You've taught me so much. And because some of the best advice I've ever been given is scoffers, meanies, naysayers are just people helping us to grow. I meant it. Thank you. I always like to tell this story. I remember being in the green room. I had a one-woman show I did for years from one of my early books called The Immigrant's Table. Because when I first moved to the West Coast, I couldn't figure out why I felt so out of place. Because I was an immigrant's daughter and they were so Italian. And I come to the West Coast and all of a sudden I'm like, we're talking to people like this. Like Spanish, there's so much of it here, so that was, I had to relearn how to live. I really felt that way. I felt sometimes as much as an immigrant as my parents must have felt when they came from Italy to New York, because it's a different world. I just talk too fast, everything was too fast, and I expected my dance students to be on time, not 15 minutes late. Imagine in Port Townsend wanting his students to be, and then with Seattle too, though, when I grew up dancing in New York, you come in late, you don't come in. 10 minutes early is on time. This is a different way of living. And yeah, so that's a whole nother talk I could give. So Barb read this essay, and which Barb read the essay now? This one. And so Barb, when did I start communicating with you?
Just a couple days ago.
Okay, so you're just the tech Barb then. Okay, tech Barb, okay. So I tell that little story about it because this is the kind of thing that I still do sometimes. And what I say to the tech guy, for instance, and then I have to remember, oh my God, Bainbridge is a really small town. Like I grew up not having to worry about stuff like that. In the city you can, and then I lived in Seattle for almost 20 years. So, you can go off a little bit on someone waiting on you. It's not like you're going to run into them next day in the grocery line. And the other day I was reminded how small Bainbridge is because I'm having a dinner party. So I had to go to a thrift store and get or the women's auxiliary and get forks and everything. And then I went to an antique store downtown because I wanted to find those beautiful little goblets you put a martini in, whatever. And the woman, as soon as I came in, she goes, "Oh, I just saw you at the women's auxiliary." And I was like, "That's what I said." But I kind of went off on this guy, but it was in the University Village store, the iPhone store. So I felt like I could. I wasn't going to run into him at the coffee shop in the morning. Okay, so it's called "Do You Exist Without Your Phone?" Does anybody remember reading this column? Because I sure got a lot of emails. Okay, so it's been nearly 6 years since I replaced my iPhone. And though peer pressure isn't really a thing in my life anymore, I still think there's a bit of it ahead. And I'll tell you why. Because I just had the battery in my phone replaced for $50, and it now holds a charge as long as it did when it was new from the box. So why replace it? Well, the Apple Store genius, and I'm not being facetious, that's what they call the techs on the floor. He's my first challenge. He looks at my phone and he rolls his eyes. Oh God, I think. Here we go. While figuring out my thinking problem, he talks with a tone so condescending, I feel immobilized. Like that moment when you realize you've locked your keys inside the car. And here I thought I was a smart, somewhat capable woman. "Did you just roll your eyes at me?" I said. Did you? Did you just roll your eyes at me? I love getting to talk like that sometimes. I go to the city just so I can talk like that again. Now, this guy is trained to look interested, so he tries a bit harder to communicate now, but he still looks a little, what's the expression? Bored out of his skull. Whenever a techie treats me this way, as if I'm uncool, unintelligent, unhip, because I can't communicate at a clip about whatever he's talking about, I just sigh. I want to stand tall, face him, and dance a few moves, plie, arabesque, pas de bourrée, and roll my eyes at him when he can't make out which movement is which, say how they interconnect, or pronounce their names. What do you mean you don't know? If the age of your phone determines how hip you are these days, I'm hopeless. And if I were to cave to the pressure, it would be me wanting to be hip, which is, of course, the opposite of hip. The hardest part was convincing tech support I really didn't want a new phone. Not only am I not taking photos through an ultra-wide lens of every little thing that's happening, or beautiful, or simply there, I often feel that I'm the only one not snapping away. And two, I often feel as though we have developed into a whole new species of humans altogether, ones who believe we will not survive if we don't record every detail of our lives. Which is pretty much, honestly, what an Apple employee said to me years ago when the iPhone was just starting to appear. I sat across from him on the Caltrain headed toward Cupertino, Apple's hometown. And that is how he described his industry's intent: to make us feel, he said, quote, as if you literally don't exist without your phone. And we'll get there, he said, one age group at a time. And when you think about it, Disney and Apple have now creating a phone for 4-year-olds. I took a deep breath, breathing in as he spoke, breathing out as I tried to imagine back then what the world would look like if everyone walked around with a tiny computer in their hand. That world looked to me like a world addicted to distraction, not at all like a world I wanted to live in. I remember thinking that it would dehumanize our reliance on each other for company. I remember thinking that it would mess with our self-image, and I teach a lot of young girls, and I see this play out. I remember thinking that what about our ability to concentrate? That image reeked of anxiety, and it appeared like an omen on every corner, at every table in a restaurant, sleeping next to me at night. The omens grew larger and larger in my head until finally I figured out what they were trying to tell me. And well, here we are today. We have reprogrammed the human experience for profit. Think what you like about prophecies, coincidence, or chance. To this day, I feel as I was on that train with someone with whom I was supposed to meet. Just so today, when I look around and I see how real Apple's strategy has become, it makes me feel just a little less uneasy. It makes me feel like I can tolerate what's happened just a little bit more. But hear me on this. There are times when my uneasiness becomes so agitated, I need to intervene. I wish I could say I could count in single digits the number of times this has happened, but I cannot. Last Wednesday, for instance, I wrote this in last July, when that temperature peaked to 84. Remember that day? So I, like many, headed for the beach. Now, if you live in the Northwest, it can be hard to feel exactly when summer begins. But on that day, summer arrived with all the luster and sunniness of a Hawaiian holiday. And down where the waves break over the beach pebbles, there were two girls, maybe 13, 14, maybe as young as 12. And they wore bikinis. Now, those bikinis today, they're, the V-shaped bottoms, they kind of make me question if this is what feminism has done for our daughters, brought out their inner exotic dancer. I couldn't keep my eyes off them, not because the mid-afternoon sun had just found us and everything was suddenly more dazzling, but because the girls were, and you may want to prepare yourself, taking pictures of their bums. To be clear, they were zooming in on each other's butt cracks.
Oh my.
In those itty-bitty thongs. And I saw how young they were and how vulnerable. So I walked up. My husband said I ran. And I asked them to please think twice before posting those images. There are images like this all over these platforms. It almost frightened me to feel so maternal, so driven by concern. Maybe I should have just turned away, and let YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram have its way with these girls. But how could I? I am not willing to mind my own business, which predictably is what one of the girls promptly told me to do. When human concern comes on this strong, especially the part of me that can't bear to imagine the men who would view those images. I know that interfering like this just might be too pushy of me. Geez, today it could get me shot. And that maybe I should have just brought my phone to the beach, sat on a rock and texted people miles away instead of noticing the ones right in front of me, like everyone else. But honestly, I wouldn't even know how to begin to do that. I don't even generally take my phone on my walks and bike rides. I realize this may be keeping me from adjusting to our world and accepting it as it is now. Or maybe the key is simpler. Maybe the key is simply to admit what is true. I am so unhip. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Oh, there's so many. Feel like we would like to just talk with you. Didn't you feel like during the times there were just a lot of times you wanted to respond to her? Like hip, I wanted to say hip really isn't a good word anymore. Yeah, but I want to add, you put at the end and the beginning, I'm going to add two things. That how did you the kids, this younger generation, you read a lot of books. This younger generation does not read a lot of books.
I know people say that a lot, but then I meet kids all the time that do. You know, they do. So, and you know, maybe it's now living on Bainbridge Island where the parents are insisting on it. It's a very educated place, you know, but you're probably right with kids. Yeah, I realize it's less so, but I hope that there are books that they love and they're reading.
But they might, that's your point, though. I think that they're on their phone all the time. When they're on their phone all the time,
But they
they're
could be
not.
reading books on their phone.
Okay, there she goes. Why you want to talk to her? A lot of things.
They can be reading their books on the phone. I mean, that's going to be a thing, you know, or on their iPad. That's a given, you know. That's been so programmed. The tech companies, they have it all planned out. That's what I read
Yeah.
to you, you know. So yeah, that's why one of the talks I give is the truth about books, because there's nobody hurting the atmosphere or the world around us more than some of the tech businesses. I mean, they're blowing up their tolls for some of the things they need to make your phone bright. What is it called? The white stuff. Oh, what's yes, thank you. And they don't even let reporters in to see these mines, and tech needs all this stuff to keep it all going. But books, and people say, oh, but it's not green to have books have not taken down a tree for 40 years. They haven't been able to afford to. 38 years, I think it is. But trees come down, never for paper. When it's just like pay online, don't. I'm like, no, that means they don't want to hire somebody to do it. They want you to do it, because paper is all recycled, and it has been forever. Trees come down for housing, and nobody's saying housing is not green. Trees come down on housing for China, India, United States, in that order. And if paper can afford anything about trees coming down, it's like the bark maybe, but even that's all becoming particle board and stuff. So everything in a book today is recycled cotton clothing, recycled paper, recycled. There's nothing really non-green about this. There's something very non-green about this. That's the truth. Okay.
Well, and by the way, you may have unconscious bias, I'm just saying, because I noticed that you spoke about Barb Boas as just the tech Barb. Just the tech Barb.
No, I didn't say just the tech Barb. I said I just talked to her.
Well,
I've been talking to that Barb for months, and just this Barb. Get your face right.
Also, first of all, anybody else talks, but I just love to talk to her. I think it's great. But how much did you have to change your written column or your spoken column from your written one? You know, you wrote one.
Mhm.
And then you spoke one, and you said when you talked on NPR or something like that, or no, I should have said it either, the one in the newspaper versus your book. Now, your book one, I think you have control over, you know.
Well, until your editor gets it, it's department. There's okay, what's your question?
Did you have to change? You had to put one in newspaper. That was.
Well, you know, in the newspaper, it's less words, and you also have to be mindful of who the readership is. You know, I can't be, you know, writing from the extreme right if the paper's from the left, you know, and you know, like, yeah. So in the book, I can be as honest as I want about the issues.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had to change a lot to make it more honest, or just it was a little.
No, I'm always honest. My columns are honest. If not, they're nothing if they're not honest. But maybe sometimes I'm not as honest as I'd like to be. Maybe I don't have the word count to go into some things, but also I have to be aware of who my readership is, you know, or whatever. Yeah, every person does race for media. That's just a fact. It's fact of it. Yes.
NPR control what you write.
NPR, you have to come from the left, totally left. That is who's giving them the money. And I feel like I am a very liberal person and everything, but there's a couple, you know, a lot of people don't know what it felt like to live in a city like Seattle and watch the city council let the city go to hell. The city council was so declared socialist, and my family escaped socialism. I'd grown up hearing how it never works on the street. It only works in ideals. I grew up hearing that, and then suddenly I'm on the West Coast and the cities fell apart. Kind of like being in New York City in late 80s, early 90s. I couldn't go outside. You know, I didn't live in Green Lake, capital. I lived in Belltown, and the city fell apart. It just caved inside because nobody knew what they was doing. They were running a city on their ideals and going home to Mercer Island. So
They've been replaced pretty much.
they have, but it's a slow turnaround because it took 7 years for New York to come out of when it happened there. It takes 7 years. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens overnight when it caves, but it doesn't happen overnight when everybody's pulled out to bring businesses back downtown and everything. So an NPR, like, well, let's just say, even if I was writing for KUW, which I used to, which is an NPR affiliate, I would not have been able to say, that city council, I mean, they're nuts. You know, I would not have been able to come out like that at all. And everybody was feeling this, but I mean, not everybody, obviously, but we just watched our city. Have you been downtown in Seattle lately compared to what it used to be? And then they let doing drugs in public become legal. And it's like, oh my God, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? But they don't even live in the city, you know? But there was a lot I wouldn't, so I actually stopped writing for some things because I just felt like, I don't know what angle to come at this, because I have to move.
So it's your figure for freedom of speech, right?
Oh, that's not even a thing.
We're talking about freedom of speech now.
Anyone else?
Freedom of writing.
Yeah, well, again, it's media. So, if in NPR, I think if they were to interview somebody who'd been living in Seattle, maybe then you could be more honest about it. But if you're going to write a commentary, which I don't even do that for them anymore, but it's a strong opinion. But yes, your editors need to approve of that opinion. Absolutely, absolutely.
Other comments and questions
Yeah.
from anybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you done one of your books on tape?
Are any of the books on tape?
You know, I've been meaning to get around to doing that. But I still have so much opportunity to bring my work live to my audiences that some people don't ever like to read in front of their audiences, and then they have, and even their books, if they're on tape, it's not them. I would love to do it myself. I love doing radio. I don't get to do much radio anymore, leaving the city, stuff like that. But I hope to do that. I haven't done it yet.
I asked because you really bring your words alive.
Yeah, but I want to bring them alive. Yeah, I know. I will get to that, and my publisher has offered to, get that. But I just honestly haven't had time. It's very time consuming. Luckily, I just bring it live. But I will do that. Yeah, that's what I love doing is bringing it live to live. That's what I love. Yeah. But you're not the first person to ask me that. People ask me that all the time. And I did a lot of radio for years where I was on the radio every Friday, at certain time. Commuting hours is what everybody wants. And so people listen to me on the radio for a while. And I do miss that. They don't have as much of that on the radio these days. And there's less and less local radio of any kind. Everything is more like we buy it and just feed it to you. So, but yes.
Yeah, and you mentioned like socialist ideas, for well. Do you recommend any other economic system other than socialism?
We're just talking
Oh my
about
gosh, I'm not taking
whatever.
on that. Yeah, no, I'm not even going there. I can't go there because I really don't know enough about running government and everything. I just know that when I would hear the people running our city speak, they had no idea what was going on in the streets. It was all from their ideals, like what they wish the world was. This is how the world should be. But it wasn't like that on the streets. We were getting held up if we left. There are addicts all over. It's like, no, it didn't work on the streets. And I think that growing up, I heard that all the time. And so I was more prepared for that. But no, I can't even comment on that because I no, I'd have to run myself and figure it out.
There's a thing coming around that schools will forbid phones in the schools. How do you feel about
I think
that?
that's a good idea. I forbid them in my dance classes and they can't go on them for 15 minutes after class. They must discuss class with the students they took class with
Oh,
instead of texting about it.
yeah.
But you know, I just thought, where was I just? Oh, I was on Maui. And I have if anybody wants to see my class in Maui, they're so cute. I have it on my phone. And and there were 30, 40 kids. I mean, there were so many of them. And like almost none of them were on social media. They're like, no, social media is not good for our mental health. No, we don't do social media. And I was like, far out. You know, I am meeting more kids like this. I mean, it is coming around a little bit because people they're being taught, and plus they're seeing their friends get bullied, and you know, they're figuring it out slowly. So I have hope. I mean, I love my phone like everyone else. There's so much, I get pictures and I get to, you know, we all love our phone for various reasons, but when I also think that it's taking away as much as it's giving us now. And I see it everywhere, like in a restaurant, everyone's on their phone. They're not even, and then they take pictures of food and they come and then they go back on their phone. It's like, it's dehumanizing. So, yeah. Anything else?
Is there anything else? But I'll just say, yes, there's two back there.
Yeah.
Say also, she'll probably stay after and talk with people.
I want to ask you a question.
That's gonna be two.
I'd like to know more about your dancing. That's what I was. I'm sorry. I'm a master teacher now. I've just danced professionally my whole life, and I've had my own studio, and I've taught all over Seattle, and I actually traveled quite extensively before COVID. I was traveling pretty much the world. I was teaching Europe and Caribbean, and then everything came to a halt, and that's just starting to pick up again. So I am teaching in Milan in first week of May before a family reunion. So it's a master teacher just means you've done it forever. It's not big deal. Mostly I tell my girls this, because it usually is all girls. There's a few boys, but I say, you know, all a master teacher means is that I've danced my whole life and I can teach a good class. And then I know the business of dance, or I know the truth about it. I've had my own dance company and blah, blah, blah. But this is what I want you to promise me. You must dance for your whole life. You cannot stop dancing after you graduate from high school. Or look at me, I'm still dancing. I'm looking at your moms. You don't stop after high school. You keep dancing your life. You don't stop after college. You keep dancing your life. You don't stop when you get married, first, second, third time, whatever. You just keep dancing. No child. I mean, my director, one of the studios I work in, she's got 4 little ones, and she's dancing in Lincoln Center. So that children do not have to keep you from being in shape to dance. You know, you keep yourself from dance. Promise me you won't. Just find a way to keep it in your life. So that's what I make them promise me. So as a master teacher, I really feel like that's my job, because anyone can teach you to dance. You know, anybody can teach you to dance, but it's good for them to see somebody my age still dancing. Because then I go, oh, wow, I can still do.
You mean the answer?
Yeah, and then I can, then when I see sometimes their faces, like when they come in, because they master teacher, what is that, old teacher, yes. But then when I do a warm up and they're having trouble keeping up, that's a really good thing for them. Yeah. Anyone else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Find a copy for you. I would love that. But I brought the friendship book, and she said in the intro that my children's book about dance was forthcoming, but it actually came out. So I have some of those too.
This is a little one in your life.
Thank you again.